Somebody else got some things done yesterday.
Who?
I mean, a stunning development.
I mean, really, really stunning.
The Chicago Bears fired offensive coordinator Shane Waldron. They've named passing game coordinator Thomas Brown their new offensive coordinator. And so now that should fix everything, right? All of a sudden, the fact that they only dressed 7 offensive linemen and still lost one of their starters in last week's game, this is going to fix everything.
Cleveland did that? Who did that this year? Somebody else did that. They relieved somebody of their play calling duties and gave it to somebody
else. The
Jets,
else. The Raiders fired.
Cleveland did. You're right.
Cleveland did
Stefanski, he gave the play calling duties to Ken Dorsey.
Yeah, and then the Jets did it as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the Raiders.
You guys follow the theme?
Hey, did the Raiders do it, Jonas?
Yeah, the Raiders did it.
Did you follow the theme of those 3 teams that the Bears are joining? The Bears.
They're all bad.
Bears.
Yeah, they're the Bears.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really, I say Bears. I mean, because that's the way it looks to me.
Here's the tough part about this decision.
Bears. Bears.
There's a few different ways of looking at this. I think the first thing is, it's not like the play caller's been there a while. So remember Matt Canada, we talked a lot about the frustration from Pittsburgh fans in regards to Mike Tomlin, his loyalty, maybe even stubbornness at times, want to move on, even though he had multiple quarterbacks. Ben Roethlisberger complained about him. Other quarterbacks who were with him kind of talked about that. Kenny Pickett, obviously, the beginning of his career was impacted largely by that. And then he finally makes the decision to move on. And then this is where we get Arthur Smith this year. But my point is, there's a middle ground where I think we're kind of missing it. Shane Waldron's in his first year as a play caller in Chicago with a rookie quarterback and a roster that's not exactly set, okay? We talked about this yesterday, right? They went Roma Dunze instead of Olu Fashanu. So to judge him in half a season for the Bears, it's tough. Now, granted, maybe there's some more things going on behind the scenes. You know, they didn't go the veteran route, start first, then Caleb. They went straight with Caleb. So it puts him in a tough spot because if we're looking at the rookie quarterbacks, how they've performed, Caleb's the one that came up with the most hype, and he's probably the one that at this point there's some pretty big concern about. So here, there's a fine line between, keeping a guy, giving him every opportunity, and being too late to move on from him, which I think happens less and less. I think more often than not, you find play callers who get canned or they move on from after a short stint, probably not enough time. That would be how I would describe this. Now, I know the Bears offense at times has been putrid, but when you have players, or I should say, and you have players going up to the coaching staff saying we need to make a change, that's tough. Like that's usually going to lead to a coach who's on the hot seat like Matt Eberflus to say, I have to make a change, otherwise I'm going to lose this team. And if I lose this team, it's going to become very apparent to ownership that I'm not the guy. And I'm still trying to hold on hope that I am the guy, or convince them that I am the guy. So that's the hard part about this for Shane Waldron, is he just got there. It's not like Nathaniel Hackett, who's been with the New York Jets, right? I mean, we saw what life was like without Aaron Rodgers when he got hurt last year and he had to call plays. We saw what life was like with him, a little bit more of a sample size. And we've also seen him a lot more in regards to he was a head coach and other spots he's been. So that's the tough part about this is, at some point, we're going to have more patience in all of this. And I just don't feel like that exists anymore in the world that we live in.
That is the trend. And listen, I think my first point is that they clearly were sitting around in their office listening to us talk about how they weren't scripted in their first 15 or so plays in the first series of their drives. And I just think they heard our show and was like, you know what, we got to move on from this guy, man. Like, they're right. They're calling us out on national radio. And I think that's what the first domino that fell was us criticizing them on this here show yesterday morning. And then to look at where this team is and to have the soundbite come out once again from this show where one Brady Quinn speaks of the idea of Caleb Williams going to a place like Kansas City and would most certainly be the player that Patrick Mahomes is or better at this point in his career, at that point in his career as a rookie, but yet he goes to the Bears and this is what he looks like. Those are like, while I'm joking, I'm being sarcastic, in real time, those are really, really damning pieces of information. Like, yeah, it's not the worst thing in the world to not have your first plays, your first series scripted out, and you run off of the script. But nonetheless, it is tried and true. It has been done for many, many moons. And as far as the idea of you are now setting Caleb Williams up to be another scapegoat of why the Chicago Bears can't win, the long line and the long list of quarterbacks that couldn't change things around in Chicago, I think that if you don't make a drastic change immediately upon those things surfacing as the reasons why, especially the one with Caleb Williams being in a setup situation to not be able to win, you had better be paying attention if you're the head coach, and you had better be trying to right what's wrong with that scenario, because it couldn't be any more true. If we have to call out the name, if we have to say disappointment or I don't like saying bust. I don't call people bust. But if you have to say a disappointing career or didn't live up to the expectations or didn't accomplish what it seemed to be that person could accomplish trajectory-wise when they were drafted, like what you're seeing with Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville, a guy like that who you saw as a can't-miss prospect. What you kind of saw happen with Baker Mayfield when he went to Cleveland, where it's like, did you judge him too quickly? Did you make a move too quickly? What happened there? When you have teams that struggle and suffer and live in mediocrity and in confusion from a organization standpoint, from a team standpoint, there are always residual effects and there's always casualties. And the sad part about it is when you see a prospect where you can't deny it. You can't deny what Caleb Williams is. And yet and still you see this is what's taking place. This is the lane that you're on right now. As a head coach, as a GM, hell, as an owner, you had better figure out ways to try to make that situation better. And maybe this is the first domino for them, is they're changing the play caller and to see if they can jumpstart and spark, the rest of this season for Caleb Williams, purely for Caleb Williams to have the success that they need him to have in this rookie campaign.
I think it also means, look, Matt Eberflus is desperate because he just hired Shane Waldron. To Brady's point, we're at week 10 games in, 9 games in, and you're already making a change. This is after you hired him this offseason. Cliff Kingsbury was there and interviewed for the job. Thomas Brown, I think, who's now the offensive coordinator, he interviewed for the job as well, too. But you go with Shane Waldron, now you're on your second offensive coordinator, but it's actually your third because you fired the last one you had, Luke Getsy, who also just got fired again.
Dang.
So this is multiple times that not just Matt Eberflus, but Ryan Poles, the GM, have whiffed on hiring offensive coordinators. And admittedly so, if you're doing this 9 games into a season, yeah, we got this one wrong. Well, you got the last one wrong, too. And then you go and you start looking. Remember that weird story that came out where the defensive coordinator in Chicago, like the FBI raided his house and he was gone? Yeah. Like 10 assistant coaches have either been dismissed or have resigned since Eberflus has gotten there. Like, this isn't just a Caleb Williams thing. Like, whatever the structure is and the setup is they've got there, it's a disaster. And you just start to look and you get these reports that come out like yesterday where, I mean, this is, who knows if this is how true this is, but Mark Silverman reported that veteran players went to Matt Eberflus about changing offensive coordinators, and some of them have asked whether or not Caleb Williams could be benched in favor of Tyson Bagent. And he's been in that city for years. I find it hard to believe he's just making that up. So when you've got people going to the coach saying, hey, maybe we should bench this guy. I don't know if that's because they don't think he's ready or if the whole thing is unraveling. Either way,
it doesn't matter. I was about to say, it doesn't matter which one it is. It's still all bad. That's all bad.
I just think the end result of this is they're going to be hiring a new coach after the season. Like that's what this looks like.
That's what it lines up to be.
And this is like a last-ditch effort by Matt Eberflus to try and save his job. They're only a game below 500. They're still in the playoff race, but with the Packers around the corner.
If we're being real, though, they're not a playoff team. No. They're just not. No. If that upsets Bears fans, you're delusional. They are not a playoff team. They're not good offensively enough. This might create a small spark. We usually get that dead cap bounce back, but for a game, that's about it. It's just, this is not a playoff team. They're not. And if they are, they're going to be bounced out quick. So they should be focusing on the future. They should be focusing on being patient. And the hard part is their head coach can't. I don't think Ryan Poles is under any pressure. Maybe for the reasons you stated, Jonas, there's pressure on him from the organization because he's been a part of some of the hiring decisions and it has not worked out. But outside of Eberflus and then having to find a new staff, there's really not, to me, a lot of pressure on Ryan Poles. Unless, again, behind closed doors, they're saying, hey, you've constructed a pretty good roster, but you've hired these guys. And this is on you now. So if this doesn't work out, we're not involving you in the next process. It's going to be a head coach that we hire. You know what happens in that instance? That guy's got a direct line to the head coach, or to the owner. The head coach does. And the reality is then it becomes a power struggle. Because if that general manager isn't a part of that hiring process for that head coach, you've already got a divide. And this is what organizations do from time to time, where they all of a sudden have this way they go about the hiring process, but that ends up being a power struggle. And a lot of times ownership, everyone comes in and says, oh, yeah, no, we'll work great together. But they're all saying that to keep their job. But eventually they butt heads. Eventually they don't get along. And when adversity strikes, which it will in an NFL season, those guys start to turn on one another. So that's the tough part about where I think the Chicago Bears are at. If this thing goes where I think it's going, and if Matt Eberflus isn't there, depending on how they're going about hiring the next head coach.